Hi, Rob the Fix-It guy here. Today I'm going to show you how to install an aftermarket fuel injection system on a carbureted vehicle. The vehicle we're going to be working on is an 86 Buick Regal. We've already installed a 350 HO Deluxe crate motor, which came with a 4-barrel Holley carburetor. We're going to be replacing that with this. So what we've got is two boxes here from FiTech. The first one over here is the Go Street 400 horsepower. It's the 3003, and this is actually going to replace your carburetor. It's a throttle body fuel injector. We've also purchased this, which is your force fuel. What this allows you to do is it allows you to keep basically most of your fuel system. So what it does is your mechanical fuel pump is going to connect to this, which is then going to boost the pressure up to 60 psi or thereabouts, and then feed the throttle body. So it actually allows you to almost not mess with your fuel tank and not run any extra lines or electrical wiring or anything like that. It simplifies the installation. So we're going to get started. There's going to be a series of videos for this project. The first project we're going to do, or first part of the series, is going to be the gas tank, because unfortunately we do have to drop it to make a minor modification, and we're going to show you how to do that. All right, so our next step, we've raised up the vehicle using a jack. We've got it on 4 jack stands now. 2 are right under the frame here, one on this side, one on the opposite, and then at the rear we've got it on the axle itself. So we show you that on the camera, and that way we're safe now to get under the vehicle and do what we need to do. All right, so we're under the vehicle now. We've got our 2 lines here. So this is our fuel line, and then over here we've got our vent line. So we've got to remove both of these because we're then going to disconnect this bolt and be able to drop down the tank. So before we do that, we're going to remove these 2 plugs, or clamps I should say. There's one. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're just going to twist these lines a little bit to loosen them up. Once you see them moving, then you know you've broken the seal. And then we're going to use a screwdriver to slide this off. Now this is the vent line, so you're not going to get any fuel out of this one, so that's fine. The other one though is going to have some fuel coming out of it. So what you want to use is a bolt that's a little bit bigger than the hose. And then what I would recommend is when you grab the hose, try and squeeze it, which will prevent the fuel from coming out too much. Do not put it over your face because it will leak. And then once you slide this out, immediately put the bolt in and tighten it up a bit. And I think we're going to be okay there. It is leaking a little bit, so it looks like I'm going to have to come up with something else here. This bolt's not big enough. All right, so I did get a gas tank with a funnel and I drained this out. As it turns out, there was very little fuel in here. Basically, the fuel you have in there is the fuel that the mechanical fuel pump was sucking. And, you know, there's a little bit obviously left in the line, but it's not much. So you can drain a little bit if you like, or you can even use a rag and then just seal up the line, which is what I'm going to do. Okay. All right, we're going to loosen this bolt. It's a 13 millimeter, and that'll allow us to disconnect these lines from the body. All right, our next step, we're going to loosen up these 2 bolts, 1 and 2, and we are not going to remove them because obviously we're under the tank at this point, so we're just going to loosen them up. All right, looks like it's a 15 mil. Definitely could have paused that. Okay, and now we're going to loosen the other one. Make sure you're not right under it. All right, so what we've done now, we've got our jack set up here. I've got a little short bucket set up under our gas tank. I want to remind you, this gas tank is almost empty, okay? So I drove the car till the fuel was pretty much on empty. So maybe we've got about 10 liters of fuel in there. You do not want to do this with a full fuel tank. That's very dangerous and it's going to be very heavy. So you want to pretty much have an empty gas tank when you do this. So my next step, I'm going to completely remove the bolts on the back, and then with my assistant, we're going to remove the gas tank. Well, we've got our gas tank out. All right, so a couple things I want to mention. I would highly recommend you have 2 people doing this. I would not use one person. I had my son Alex helping me, and it really came in handy. The other thing I forgot to mention earlier, there is a ground here that you need to disconnect. It actually goes up to the second strap, which is just up here. So this should be disconnected prior to dropping the tank fully. And also your fuel level. This just pops out. There's a connection here. Whereas this one here, there's actually a screw you've got to remove. So I've got our tank fully out, and now we can start to address what's going on here. These lines look pretty badly rusted. We may have to replace some of those. And this is our fuel sending unit. So as I was mentioning to you, we are going to have to make a small modification for our fuel injection. This is a small modification we need to make. Some of these vehicles actually came with a 3-line system where there's a return line for the fuel, even though they were carbureted. This particular car did not. So this particular car, because of the type of carburetor it had, it's only got your 2 lines, your fuel out and your vent out. There should be a 3rd line, which is going to provide your fuel return line. All right, so as I said, a small modification on the gas tank. This is the part I had to purchase. I purchased one from Spectra Premium. That's the model number of the part. And what this is, it's essentially identical to this, but it's got 3 lines. So you've basically got your fuel line, you've got your vent line, and then you've got your return line. So it gives you all 3 lines that you require for setting up your vehicle for fuel injection. Now you might be wondering, why am I going with the force fuel system? If I wasn't going with the force fuel system, what I would have to do is either install a fuel pump inside the tank, which now means you need wiring for that fuel pump, or what you would have to do is install an inline fuel pump, which would be mounted somewhere under the vehicle, and you'd also need to run 12 volts to that. You would also need high pressure fuel line from here to the front of the vehicle. So by using the force fuel system, I do not need to install a high pressure fuel pump. I do not need high pressure lines from here to the front of the vehicle. I can just use normal pressure lines. The only modification I had to make was the fuel sender unit. I had to buy one with 3 lines as opposed to the stock, which had 2. So we're going to toss this in. There's going to be a little bit of cleanup involved before we do that. And then we're going to reconnect it, and we're going to have to run a fuel line for the 3rd pipe, which is your return line. I did already purchase the rubber fuel line, and we're going to be installing that as well. All right, so I'm going to show you here, we've got a little bit of rust issue with these lines. You can see they're a little bit corroded here. We don't care about these because that's going to be replaced. But here, and basically this rubber is what always destroys lines. So what happens is the lines sit in here, and then they rust, you get moisture in there. Same thing happens to power steering lines, fuel lines. Anytime they go through any kind of clips or rubber mounting, you'll notice that that's the area that's most corroded. So I think my plan, they don't look terrible. I'm going to clean them up, and then I'm either going to paint them with some rust paint, and then maybe a little undercoating, or I may use Pour 15. I know I have some of that, so either way, but we're going to get these cleaned up. There's a little bit of rust here too, but not too bad. I'm going to clean them up, we'll see how it goes. Alright, so there is a little ring here that actually turns and locks in place. So what we're going to do, you can see there's a tab here, and then there's another tab here, and a third tab here. So basically we need to get this to turn so that we can release the fuel sending unit. And that's done. So before I remove this, I'm going to vacuum again, because you do not want to have any rust or dirt dropping into your fuel tank. Not easy to get out. It's possible, but not easy. Alright, we've vacuumed the area now. I'm going to lift this off, and you're going to see there's our fuel sending unit. And there we go. And have a look inside the tank. It looks nice and clean. The fuel looks nice and clear. There's no rust in there. Add a little light for you so you can see. And you see that? Nice and clean. That's the way it should look. You shouldn't have rust or any kind of nasty stuff in there. It should be nice and clean. Alright, so what we've done here, we're preparing to install our new fuel sending unit. We did get a new O-ring with the kit. And it sits right in this groove here. So that's why I vacuumed this all out. You don't want any debris sitting in there. You want that in there. And then our sending unit, you're going to gently slide this in here. There we go. And then our final step is going to put in our ring to clamp it down. And now it's secure. Okay, so we're going to do our final tightening here. You're going to see this little tab. It should come all the way to here. So I've got about another 1/4 of an inch there to tap it in. And now we're fully there. Alright, so we've cleaned up our lines here. As you can see, they look a heck of a lot better. There is still some pretty deep corrosion in this area. And because these lines are not easy to replace, you know, they're kind of difficult to find. What I did was cleaned it up, and generally they're pretty good. If I didn't have any Pour 15, I'd probably use Tremclad. I have some over there. So over here I've got Tremclad, your regular rust paint. If I didn't have Pour 15, this is what I would use. I do happen to have some Pour 15 from a previous project. Those of you who haven't heard of it. It's actually pretty amazing stuff. It bonds to metal, guaranteed to last forever, and it's oil and gasoline proof. So it is a 3-step process. You've got to, first you've got to clean, then you've got to do the prep, and then finally you've got the actual Pour 15 product that goes on top. Like I say, if I didn't have that, I would probably just use a couple of coats of this, but seeing as I have it, I'm going to take advantage of it. Obviously, being fuel lines, I don't want them to leak in a year or 2 years or 3 years, and then I got to drop the tank again. Not a lot of fun. So that's the process. Okay, so I'm going to show you here what I've sort of done. This is your fuel line coming through here, right here. You can see that moves a little bit. We need to run the return line through the same hole. The problem is, if you're just pushing the return line through, it might end up down this shaft. which you don't want. So you want it to come through here. So what I've done, I've got basically a metal wire here, which I've temporarily just wrapped around the fuel pump here, and I've shoved it through the hole. I'm going to show you where that is on the other side. So now this is coming through. I've got my fuel line for, my return fuel line. And now what I'm going to do is just put a hole through this, wrap the wire through, and then I'm going to yank it through. All right, so here's, I'm going to drill a hole through the fuel line, right there. And now I'm able to take this wire and actually secure it through the hose. All right, so there we go. We've got our metal wire through the hose, and then I'm gonna pull this through just a little bit more. And that's gonna enable me to wrap it around. So once we've got it wrapped around, I'm then gonna pull it from the other side. We're gonna end up where we want to end up. All right, so we're gonna start pulling our cable here. You're gonna notice the cable is right next to our fuel line here. Hopefully you can see that. And I'm just gonna pull it through, and I'm gonna pull some extra. When you're doing this job, I purchased 20 feet return fuel line. 5/16 is what you need for the return line. The fuel line, which is already in your car, is 3/8, and the vent line, which should also be in your car as well, is 1/4. So there's 3 different sizes. But the one for the return is 5/16. All right, so we prepared our tank. We've got it close to the vehicle. We're just under the bumper here. And as you can see, we've connected our 3 lines. This one here is our fuel line. This one here, which is 1/4 inch, is actually our vent line. And this one here is our return line, which is 5/16. So 3/8, 1/4, and 5/16. So as you can see here, this one's all rubber because it's not the stock line. This is the one we ran. These 2 turn into metal. These are the stock lines. And we did refinish those in Pour 15. You can see they came out quite nice compared to what they looked like earlier. This has been secured in here, the fuel pump. We've got our fuel gauge wire, and here we've got our ground. So we're gonna get this close to where it needs to be in place, and then we're gonna hook up those lines, and then we're gonna lift it in. Okay, so we're just gonna show you here how we managed to get the tank in. First of all, you do need 2 people, absolutely. You need safety glasses for sure. But what we found worked best is using 2 jacks. And the great things about the jack stands is that as you maneuver the tank into position, you can then raise the jack. So you can slowly move it up a little bit, raise the jack a little bit. And it actually does a pretty good job of holding it up. As you can see, it's pretty stable. We did put some duct tape on the ends of the jack just to help prevent scraping the tank up. But other than that, it seems to be working well. We do have our electrical connections hooked up. Here's one of them, and the other one's a ground, which is on the other side. And we've also got the lines at the back, the 3 fuel lines. We've got those in position as well. All right, we're going to show you a little bit of cleanup we've done here. We've got our two original lines, fuel and the vent, and we've got our return line here. So we've basically brought them along the same path, and we've used some ties to hold them together. And then what I'm going to do is pull a little bit of slack on the return line, because I did leave a little bit extra. And then we're going to start doing some tie downs over on the side of the car under the door. So we'll show you that next. Okay, so I'm going to give you some insight here into how we ran the lines. I'm going to go all the way to the back here, close to the fuel tank. A little bit hard to see up there, but let's see if we can get you some vision. Yeah, that's going to be hard to see. Well, you can see the lines here. So this black line, the black rubber line, is our return line that we installed, and we've got ties on all of it. And then we ran it all underneath here. This is, there's a little cavity here right under the door. And so we've basically just followed the path of the fuel line. And so it's going in the same spot and tucked in nice and tight.